guess I could ask you something about, I guess, macroevolution, if that's okay.
Yeah.
My question is this, right? I always see like atheists always like commenting about, there's so much evidence for it, right? My question generally is, why does that even contradict Islam, if it even does? Because look, if macroevolution is speciation, right? Then why does a fish becoming a monkey somehow disprove Adam's creation?
Okay, so firstly, brother Edin, the first thing I want to do is, regardless of whether it contradicts the Quran or not, that's a different matter which we can deal with. Let's look at their claim. There's so much evidence for macroevolution, right? And if you actually ask them, what is your evidence for macroevolution? They will say, well, microevolution, because if you can walk 5 miles, you can walk 500 miles. So the essential argument is, if small scale changes plus long, deep time equals massive changes over a long period of time. That's their basic argument. Now, there's some serious issues with this. The first one is the fallacy of equivocation. So what this is doing is, this is equivocating two different types of processes. Microevolutionary processes cannot be equated to macroevolutionary processes. So when it comes to, okay, think of it this way. Let's Paul Nelson, who I just had on my channel.
Yeah, I saw that stream.
He gave a very good analogy. If you were watching, since you were watching, brother Eden, he gave the analogy that, you see, when we think of Darwinian evolution, it's like a plane flying, and when the plane is flying in mid-air, you change the components of the engine, but you change them in such a way that you don't cause a disruption that the plane comes down and crashes. So there's a constraint on what's possible.
Really good.
It's a really good, really good analogy. You can't have you have a principle of continuity. You can't have, let's just stop, let's just restart. No. You have that constraint throughout.
And just tell them who he is.
Yes. Very, very good point. Paul Nelson is a philosopher of biology. He is somebody who, by the way, anybody seen that very popular documentary in which Richard Dawkins is talking about aliens, and maybe we were created by aliens, and this has been seen by millions of people all across the world. It's called Expelled, No Intelligence Allowed. Millions of views, and it's popular. And if you watch in that documentary, they show leading biologists and philosophers of biology who challenge Darwinian evolution. And Paul Nelson, you will see him throughout the documentary. In fact, the Discovery Institute, of which Paul is a fellow, is the one behind the documentary. And Paul Nelson is the one who made the risky prediction about 20 years ago about orphan DNA, that there is DNA which doesn't fit. Okay, let me just give I think it's worth everybody knowing. So in terms of our genome, the Darwinists will always try and link it back to some parental species, some other organisms, and going back till they have this beautiful tree. However, what Nelson's been saying for a very long time is that, no, there is data there is DNA there which doesn't fit the tree. And there was some anomalous data that was coming out which wasn't fitting the tree of life. And at that particular time, scientists said, this is a sample error, or this could be explained due to this. And they had all these type of ideas to challenge it. However, he said, no, it's going to increase exponentially. It's going to be a lot more. And that's what it turned out to be the case. So if you look at the graph, and if you go to my channel, you will see that he actually has a chart with all the data. And this is like the early 90s, the early 2000s. And then the anomalous data becomes almost, it skyrockets this way, right? So Paul Nelson, he gives the example of the engine and this type of thing. And also something else which I spoke to him about, which I think is very important, is worth noting here. Kuhn, who Hijab, myself, others have studied, he speaks about normal science and revolutionary science. So in a way, this is what me and Paul were speaking about when it comes to orphan DNA. Now, think about a revolution, the French Revolution. In terms of the French Revolution, you have the monarchy. They are the people in the castle with the country, with the power. And then you have the revolutionaries who are saying, your system's wrong, your system's corrupt. So Kuhn used this as he used scientific paradigms. He used language which likened them to like a political paradigm. So when you have a prevailing regime, and then you have people on the outside saying, you're wrong, those are the revolutionaries. But the people who are running the regime, they are known as the ones working within the normal research framework or normal science. And what they'll do is every time a revolutionary will say this thing is wrong, they will try to reinterpret it in their theory. So they'll keep doing that until the pressure builds. There's so many anomalies that you have to have a paradigm shift and a revolution. So a really good example is Newtonian mechanics. There's a very, very interesting historical story here, which I think all of us should really memorize because it's really worth understanding it. So the Newtonian worldview worked well for well over 200 years. If you predicted where is a planet going to be in 6 months from now, that's exactly where it would be if you did equations correctly. And obviously there was assumptions about time and space is fixed and this type of stuff. However, when the Newtonian worldview was used to actually predict the behavior of the planet Mercury, what happened was it was wobbling. It wasn't doing what the Newtonian worldview was saying it's going to be doing. The Newtonian model is saying it's going to be doing. So what scientists said is, okay, Newton can't be wrong. Newton's been right for so long, and we've done all this amazing. We've developed science, we've developed technologies based on Newton. There's no way he can be wrong. So they are working within normal science. So what happened is they said, well, you see, there must be a planet out there called Vulcan, and the planet must be interfering and must be causing Mercury to wobble because of its gravitational pull, right? And so that became a sort of a story which is used in science to show, and obviously Vulcan didn't exist, and Einstein came later on and showed through general relativity that time and space is flexible, and that anomalous data fitted with his theory, not with Newton's theory. But the scientific community understands they can make mistakes of the Vulcan type. They can come up with ad hoc rationalizations to fix an existing theory. Now, what it is with macroevolution or with orphan genes is the Darwinists will always find their Vulcans. They will always find their way of fitting and plugging the data. And when it comes to the issue of macroevolution, there are basic things, and I just want to raise this point, basic foundational things which are completely missing when it comes to the Darwinian explanations. For example, in 2016 at the Royal Society in London, they had a meeting between various different biologists, and the meeting was about whether Darwin is right in natural selection. Now that sounds strange because since 1859, everyone's been singing and dancing that, Darwin was right. But in the Royal Society,
when?
2016.
Okay.
And the interesting thing, Hijab, about the Royal Society is the Royal Society is the oldest society in the world. Mm-hmm. It's the very same society in which 1858 Darwin first came to publish his theory, and then published it the next year in 1859. And they are not some religious institute, but they're having a debate whether he's right. And it was about his core mechanics, which, by the way, are supposed to explain macroevolution. But guess what? They don't even explain the origin of body plans, which is the foundational problem. So the issue really here is
sorry, just to ask. I know I'm meant to be asking us, but now you got me interested. The whole third wave evolution thing, with Dennis Noble and
yeah.
So is
absolutely linked.
Is he part of it?
Yes. So very good question.
Yeah.
On the third wave evolution, you're going to have people like Eva Jablanka, who believes in neo-Lamarckism. She was actually there at the conference. So these are people who they say there has to be an alternative to the Darwinian framework, and because it's not fitting the data. However, this is something very, very important, and I'm going to get Hijab to work out what the answer is here, not myself. Yeah. It's Ali Dawa.
No way.
He's actually watching, mashallah. So I got distracted.
Yeah.
Where's the marriage documentary, bro? So anyway,
I'm still in microevolutional stages.
Subhanallah.
It actually is an abiogenesis. It's the starting of he just pressed click to record. Anyway, I actually forgot what I was saying. I just saw Ali Dawa.
You also got Royal Society in 2016.
There you go.
The macro changes.
Yeah, there you go. So this whole idea that they've explained it is not right at all. In fact, and yes, I remember now what I was saying. What I was saying was, even though there's these alternatives, no matter what, they still have to go back to some sort of Darwinian framework. And I want to grill Hijab to find out why.
Oh, because of homology?
No.
Why?
Okay, even Brother Eden.
Yeah, please.
Why?
Eden, help us out here, man.
Why do they have to go back to Darwin? By the way, this is a very difficult question. I didn't work out the answer until it took me a very long time. And in fact, people like Philip Johnson and others have pointed this out in the 1990s, but it's something which is quite hard to grasp. Long story short, methodological naturalism.
All right, yeah.
Methodological naturalism is the only game in town, which means Ali's trying to distract us with his comments. So methodological naturalism is the only game in town, right? Therefore,
can you just quickly explain what it is?
No, can you explain it? Because he's distracted.
All right, so
he said marriage is evolving.
Methodological naturalism is the assumption that there's no supernatural when you're doing science.
Okay, fine. But why would that lead to a conclusion that life had to evolve with through some natural processes?
Because there's no alternative.
Okay, then why do they stick with Darwinism and not something else?
Yeah, that's a good question. Why do they have to stick to Darwinism and not something else? Because you could technically have an evolution that's not Darwinism and would still.
Yes, you can. Yeah. But yes, exactly. Yeah. Now, good.
Yeah.
But why do they stick to Darwinism?
I don't know.
Okay, because amongst the other models, like, for example, natural genetic engineering
or neo-Lamarckianism.
Yeah. The problem is they open up the door closer to theistic compatibilities.
Oh, really?
Yes. It's like natural genetic engineering, and there's gaps there.
Right.
With Darwinism, it's all encompassing.
So just as a question, neo-Lamarckism, for example. So Lamarck believed that the giraffe elongates its neck because it keeps reaching for the leaves or whatever, and then these traits are going to be inherited by the
mashallah, you've been reading, mashallah.
No, bro, I learned that GCSE.
Oh, mashallah.
Back in the 1800s.
Did you start applying it to yourself?
I wanted to know what I was like.
Jordan in the class.
Yeah, so neo-Lamarckism.
Yes.
I'm guessing that if these traits are all hereditary, I'm trying to guess why this is more theistic or more in line with.
Okay, there's gaps.
Okay.
Yeah. So where is that coming from? That tendency.
Yeah. Where is it coming from?
So you see, that's why some people thought that Lamarck's ideas were incomplete.
Right.
The thing is with Darwinism, it explains by explains I mean they have a story for everything in a purely naturalistic way.
Yeah.
But with the other ones like natural genetic engineering, where, for example, mutations are not random, they're directed. Mutations where the organism decides, okay, I need this. Yeah. All of those things, they can have more theistic implications.
I have a question.
And also Darwinism is the most simplest.
Sorry, Ed, I know that you're but I have a question, sorry. Do you know that you were describing before, like privately you were having a discussion about the processual view versus the gene-centered view, right? And the processual view is like that nature as a whole, like well-oiled machine.
Yeah.
And
not machine. It's a well-oiled system.
Right. Well,
because a machine is one way. Yeah.
Right. So, like for example, go back to this simple giraffe example. The leaves are higher up, and then the giraffe extends its neck. but it wouldn't be able to extend its neck unless the leaves were there, right?
Yeah.
So it's almost as if the ecology or if the surrounding determines the outcomes more so than the gene, because in the gene-centered view, it's like, is it more driving force, the gene's driving force, than it is the...
Okay.
Do you see what I'm asking?
Yes, I see what you're saying. So, okay, very good question, yeah?
Sorry, sorry.
No. Very...
You're much more intelligent than me, so go ahead.
The thing is, the hair is turning him into a sort of Sherlock Holmes. He's asking very good.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay, what he's basically saying is,
yeah,
hijab is basically saying, the gene-centered view says we adapt to the environment.
Mm-hmm.
The processual view says, or the other view, which is known as niche construction, says we adapt the environment to our needs.
Is that interchangeable processual?
Well, it can be. It can be, because you see, with the gene-centered view, it's like a one-way thing.
Right.
With the processual view, it's like a feedback loop.
Right.
So everything flows.
Yeah.
Now, the good thing here, the very interesting thing here,
mm-hmm.
in answer to your question,
yeah,
is Darwinists would tell us it's about selection. It's about the selfish view, which is genes determine organisms, organisms then determine societies, and it's like one way.
Mm-hmm.
However, and we adapt to the environment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the environment is fixed or
right.
not fixed, or it's forcing us to change.
Right.
Interestingly, what we've discovered for some time now
mm-hmm.
is human beings and other organisms,
mm-hmm.
rather than adapting to the environment,
mm-hmm.
we adapt the environment to us. Mm-hmm. For example,
mm-hmm.
beavers, they build dams,
mm-hmm.
or humans.
Yes.
It's cold outside, rather than adapting to the environment, we adapt the environment to us. So we start building a house, we start building tables, we start having heating.
Right.
So what you're saying is a very interesting point. And yes, this is a huge thorn in the side of Darwinism.
I want to say something else as well. Tell me where you stand on this. I was reading something, Devil's Delusion by David Belinsky some time ago.
I'm gonna have to give up my channel because hijab is mashallah.
No, of course not. As in, this is actually hopefully an answer to your question, but I'm going to ask him to kind of answer you right.
Mashallah.
So David Belinsky, he's actually a clip on him on YouTube talking about this. He makes similar arguments in his book Devil's Delusion, where he talks about the transformation. And to be crude, obviously we're not talking about a cow and a whale, but he talks about the transformation of like a mammal, a land mammal like a cow, to a whale.
Yep.
And he asks this beautiful question. And the way he puts it is, I'm not. If you haven't, and if anyone hasn't seen this, you go and check this out. His name is David Belinsky, and the way he talks about the cow, I don't know if it's on YouTube or something, but it's so powerful. It requires a reaction video between me and you. It's very powerful on your channel. But basically, he says that how many transformations need to be made from a cow to become a whale? Like, let's just think about it. Is it he asked the question, he goes 10,000, 20,000, 50,000? How many transformations, right? And then he goes back to, I think, what you were saying about this whole plane and changing the engine in midair and so on like that. It's got to be movements so much, because obviously
it's constraints.
Yeah, the constraints. But here's the constraint issue becomes even more pronounced when we're talking about moving from lung to gill.
Yes.
Now think about that for a second. I mean, when I first thought about that, it really made me think the amount of faith that these Darwinians have.
Yeah.
Because you believe that a cow, now to put it really crudely, right, or a cow-like creature can eventually evolve to become like a whale-like creature.
Yeah.
And there's many mutations that happened.
Yeah.
How many of them have to happen? 50,000, 100,000, a million, a billion, whatever it may be. But we have to believe that happens, A, and B, that it happens in the way that you suggested. So we're talking about the plane moving in midair, but the engine
without crashing.
Yeah. So that exactly is a perfect analogy for the cow. Whale transition.
I just love the way you say cow.
The cow-whale transition, right? Now it's really powerful, because the thing is, when Darwinists, or if you call them that, I'm not sure if that's what they would be called, but Darwinists, people like Richard Dawkins, or his people of his ilk, sometimes they are skeptical as well. Skeptics.
Yeah.
I don't see how you can be a Darwinian skeptic. By the way, I see that as a contradiction.
Yes.
I really do, because if you're a skeptic, what I've just described sounds a lot like religion.
Yes.
Like, I don't care who tells me that.
Yes.
You're telling me a cow transformed into a whale.
Or even I would say, as somebody who's open to the idea of theistic evolution, right?
Yes.
directed by
I mean,
Allah,
yeah.
that would be a possibility.
It would be, yeah.
But undirected natural selection.
That's what we're saying.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It just doesn't make any
but
sense.
We're not against Darwin evolution, but we're not against all of it. Like, like he says, if it's speciation, to answer your question, speciation, adaptation, and even like I had the podcast with Abdullah Ajeri, who's like,
yes,
and he was saying like
animal
evolution is no problem. We believe in a specific, the thing that we don't believe in is that Adam evolved. The other things.
No, but even with that, I think the caveat is
yes,
we're open to it. Not that
we're open to it. Exactly right.